There we go. Was that? There we go. Sorry, Zuzi's going to be very mad at me if she doesn't have a recording to do the notes from. We've been talking about the regional master plans. Dan, I do think that if everybody was able to send those strategic plans at the municipal level, people might be able to take a look at those. That's another data point that we can use when we're looking for commonalities. It might be a little bit of information overload to expect everybody to read every one of those prior to next week's conversation, but I think if we could all at least plan to skim as many as we have time for and understand that each of the municipal folks is probably going to need to come to be the voice for your plan and be able to give the elevator pitch of here are our top 3 priorities and what we want to get done. I think that's definitely going to help us as well as we think about, and by us I mean the regional entities, SRPC included, as we think about what kind of technical assistance we can provide over the next year. We're in the final year of our CARES Act funding. And as we think about what are some of the last things that we can accomplish during that time, it would be great to be able to make those connections and identify some of those priorities. Other thoughts? Format ideas, concerns?
James, I just wonder if we do get some level of agreement that the workforce issue is one of the primaries, we might have a discussion on those things we might attempt to do to mitigate or improve the situation over the next year or 3 years.
Yeah, so I think I see this sort of being a multi-staged conversation where next week we are sort of looking at what are the big themes, topics that we're working on. I think some of that, to my mind, is also thinking about how those things break down. So when you say workforce issues, when I hear that, to me, that could be workforce training, that could be workforce attraction and retention. Workforce attraction and retention in this day and age can sometimes just be a coded way of saying we need to work on housing. So I think for me, I would be wanting to tease out some of the nuance of exactly which 2 or 3 issues do we want to move the bar on, and then those follow-up conversations, maybe in November into December, could then flip from what do we want to talk about, who do we want to hear from, to what are 1 or 2 bites at the apple that we could take in the next year to make some progress. So agreed, we should be working towards that implementation long term. I think we need to start with a little bit of a filter before we try to run at the wall and do everything. Teresa Walker.
Thank you, James, for setting this, because I think this is a great shift for this group going forward. And I would be interested to hear more about how municipalities are using the ARPA funds as it relates to pandemic response and even SEDS things. Mm-hmm. I glean from looking at websites and going through town media some ideas, but I would appreciate hearing from our municipal representatives about that, because I think that sets a path for identifying not only technical assistance, but just trends too. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Right, and figuring out sort of what's being done already and where are the gaps. If people were consistently using ARPA funds for specific things, we might be able to steer in another direction. John Nyan?
Sorry, I had you on mute. I just wanted to kind of share with the group. It's not a municipality update on opera, but something that I'm doing as part of what I guess we would consider the nonprofit organizations in the state of New Hampshire. As most of you know, opera has two major grant applications. One that went straight to the state, and it's now being will be administered by DEA for about $8 million. And the travel and tourism group, headed up by Commissioner Caswell, will be looking at how to spend that $8 million. I know that they have reached out to a number of state agencies to get input on what their wish list is, if you will. And so when we started to take a look at the competitive grant application, I made a decision through the New Hampshire Association of Chambers, which I am now chair of, to go out to other organizations such as the Travel Council, such as the Restaurant Lodging Retail Association, the New Hampshire Campsite Association, a number of travel and tourism related organizations around the state. And I'm suggesting that we at least explore the possibility of doing one statewide application under the non-competitive, under the competitive grant program. Most of you know that money nationwide is very competitive. It's about $244 million. It's broken down into 6 EDA areas. Our EDA area is Philadelphia, which includes 14 states. And out of that 14 states is about $95 million to be allocated. So even though we talk millions, it's when you look at 14 states and being divided into competitive grants, it's not a whole lot of money. So I have been working with Senator Shaheen's office and getting some input. I have a request out to Alan up in Maine to have a discussion with him to talk about his thoughts about a comprehensive application. And I'm sure that as we explore, and I'm using that word very sensitively, because I'm not sure if we will even be able to do this application at the end of the day in terms of eligibility, et cetera, but I'm at least exploring the feasibility of this type of comprehensive application. With that, I've had a number of Zoom meetings. I had a Zoom meeting last week with the New Hampshire Travel Council to get their input. I have 2 Zoom meetings with chambers across the state today and tomorrow. Basically asking each organization I speak to is based on the eligibility of different projects. Projects that will be accepted under the competitive grant. Is there anything in your communities that you would like to put on a wish list? And I would suspect that since that wish list is including construction and non-construction projects, there might be some that the local organization or the regional organization will have to go to their municipality to either work directly in partnership with or at least in support of if there's a project that they would like to include in this comprehensive application. So I just wanted to alert this group in because I know you all have done a tremendous amount of work, and I can tell you that this group, which I just kind of sit on the sidelines and listen and watch, you have become a premier example of what other organizations around the state should be doing. So saying that, that's what my plan is. I'm not sure how far down the road we're going to be able to go, but I'm going to at least give it a shot to see, how it goes. My concern is that EDA is going to probably pick one grant application per state. And so I would rather see if we could put a comprehensive plan together rather than 8 or 9, 10, 12 local organizations putting in applications and everybody's competing against each other, and nobody wins. So, I'm open for any questions, thoughts that any of you might have. But I think it's important that we try to get one grant application approved in the state of New Hampshire, based on what EDA is saying, that it looks like only one per state anyways.
So I dropped the link to the EDA Travel Tourism and Outdoor Recreation program in the chat. And John, I think you're talking about, they've got the state tourism grants line up top, and then they've got the competitive tourism grants on the bottom. So you're talking about that second line, that competitive pool. They say that an application it's rolling and an application is due 60 days after receiving an invitation to apply. So it seems like whatever sort of coalition or lead entity would actually be the applicant needs to do a little bit of groundwork with Philadelphia before we could even submit something for that. Have you gotten any clarity or feedback about who that entity would likely to be, who it would need to be, who would be willing?
Well, I have put in a request, because after going through last night for the third time, the 41 pages of EDA guidelines and requirements, it clearly is one that it recommends almost on every page that if you have a question about this or a question about that, you need to contact your EDA rep, which in our case, it's Alan.
Yep.
And he is actually out on leave right now until the end of October. So I'm trying to reach out to see if anybody else in the.
Do you have David Cohen's contact information?
David Cohen?
Yeah.
No, I do not.
Okay, I'll get it to you. He is our grant officer on our CARES Act stuff, and I think he's supposed to be helping with ARPA as well. So if Alan is out, David is probably the best go-to to get a meeting or follow up from EDA in the short term.
Okay.
So I'll send that over to you. It may or may not help your cause to have the EDDs interested in setting up that meeting as well. So to the extent that Laurel or Teresa or Jen Kimball or I can help make that connection and help at least get you some of those logistics from the starting point.
That would be great, James, because I was planning, I have it on my notes today to reach out to Jen and Laurel to kind of get their input. And to go back to your original question, I have put in a request, knowing that I'm not sure who will be determined as the eligible applicant. You could have co-applicants, but you need to have a primary applicant. And that primary applicant also has to be a fiscal agent, the one that would actually accept the grant money. So I've put in a request to Taylor Caswell to see if he, under BEA, would be willing to be our partner in this, and see if the state could accept the grant money under our comprehensive plan. If not, we'll have to take a look at who would be. I'm not thinking that we would be qualified as a chamber to be able to do a multi-million-dollar grant application. So I'm going to have to look at who's out there that could be our fiscal agent if in fact we go down this road. But I'm starting with the BEA and Taylor to begin with to see if he has the opportunity, or if he has the ability to manage a second account The first one being his 8 million.
Yeah, and I guess theoretically under that, yeah, the likely landing places for that within BEA to me seem like either Scott Crowder as outdoor rec or somewhere under travel and tourism. Teresa, would you be able to help facilitate that conversation as to whether BEA could be willing or able?
Yes, yes, I will. I will take this up with Tina in our leadership team for her to have that discussion. I think what they're going to be sensitive to is that the BEA, of course, is, you know, we don't have an endless source of staffing
Yep.
here, and you're talking a lot of money, and we're already pushed with the money that we received, and also the fact that, you know, if we do that, do we open up a box where a lot of then other organizations or joint collaborations come and want the state to be a lead fiscal agent and the responsibilities in that? So, but we'll have that discussion and see. I think they're always open to partner and doing whatever we can. So yes, I will take that up and try to push that forward, that discussion forward for you, John and James.
All right. And Teresa, just as an FYI, so we're not duplicating, I had a meeting with Amy Bassett and Lori yesterday,
Okay.
and we kind of compared to what BEA was planning on doing with their 8 million and what I was thinking of. And
Mhm.
so they too are going to ask Taylor about the same question.
All right, so I'll
because-
just give a heads up to Tina. So when that
Yeah.
conversation comes up at the leadership team, she has an awareness.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you.
Okay, so John, I'll send an email right after this meeting to sort of follow up with those next steps and make those connections, and hopefully we can at least get some clarity about where that's going to go.
And James, if I may be bold enough to ask for help. When I looked at the EDA application, there's a lot of things that this goes way over my head. In terms of the federal government's definition of this and that, and how do you explain this? And so I might reach back out to this group once again to help me with the technical side of understanding what they are asking us to say, and then what's the best way to say it in their terms. You know, because I have a funny feeling that their review process will be a checklist, and they'll ask the question and we have to give an answer. And if our answer isn't as technical as they would like it to be, that could be a minus mark towards the application. So if it's all right, I might be coming back to this group if we do move forward with some technical assistance in the application process.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the seeing that this is an invitation only sort of rolling application deadline, this feels like it's going to work a lot more like some of the standard EDA applications where they want to get involved early and sort of help develop and shape the project, and you know, they'll only give you that invitation to proceed once they are pretty sure that you know, you have a solid project and are likely to be funded.
Yep.
So I think my goal would be starting with those conversations with David and or Alan to see, all right, what exactly do you need to see from us to get that invitation to apply? What questions do we need to answer for you and for ourselves as far as who's involved and how? So I think definitely starting with that logistical conversation first, and we can dive into some of the federal nitty-gritty once we at least have an understanding of you know, who's going to need to help take this on.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, no problem. So pulling things back to a little bit bigger picture, yeah, I think that, you know, what we just had is exactly the sort of conversation that we'd like to continue to have over the next few months. But thinking about, with all of the opportunities that are out there, taking a reset moment to think about exactly what problems we are trying to solve and what capacity we have to solve them, is something that I think will help us to prioritize, which of these opportunities, whether it's, when are things due, what we have the capacity to work on, how could we divide and conquer some of these things to be able to make the most effective use of our talents as a group. Thinking about, as I said, we'd like to take a closer look at some of those regional master planning documents for next time. So you all should have the links to a few so far. If people can point us to your own strategic plans and what have you in the next day or two, we'd like to get the agenda for next week out very early. I guess, to what extent would you need, how familiar is everybody with the ins and outs of the economic development districts and what are, SEDS as a master plan is designed to do versus the regional comprehensive plans and the regional planning commissions and our responsibilities under that? Would it be helpful to have a brief sort of framework refresher of sort of how our organizations work and how we wear different hats, or is that something that everybody generally feels pretty comfortable with?
I think a brief review would be appropriate.
Okay. So Sarah, I know you're on the call and I see that Tim just jumped in. So maybe we can touch base, and Teresa, if you're able to check and see if Laurel or Jen would be able to join us next Tuesday. Maybe we could plan for maybe 5 minutes at the beginning of the call, just for this is who we are and how we function, and this is our goals for this plan and document and the purpose it serves for us. Teresa Pinto.
Yes, in that vein, I think it would be very helpful for me. So at BEA, we have talked about for our CEDRs, offering to bring in our partners, our departments and divisions that are working on some of those statewide strategies, so that give you the awareness of what's happening statewide at a higher level, and then understanding what's happening regionally within the Seacoast, and then finding, like you said, that nexus. So really understanding what agencies are doing what on a statewide, and what role all of you can play, and what can you leverage, but also what can the state tap into and leverage, help you leverage. So it could be the talent pipelines that the Office of Workforce Opportunities is doing, the recruitment and attraction that Travel and Tourism is doing. We now have planning here inside of BEA. So that is census, that is floodplain management, that is infrastructure. There's someone in charge of housing. So there's a lot of resources and information that we offer. If you want to have them come in on a regular basis and give you an update on a statewide perspective of what they're focused on, we absolutely are behind that 100%.
Yep. Yeah, and the other agenda item that we had today, that's something I've sort of touched on in recent weeks, but thinking about who we'd like to have come in as speakers over the course of the fall. I think this conversation next week can definitely also help us prioritize which of those people are joining and how soon. And we are always looking for feedback. So if you have very specific ideas, who was it? I think Darren just suggested having somebody come and talk about housing very soon. that's something that's on our mind for the housing needs assessments that are ongoing as well, and when it would be best to get some feedback from you, or at least just give you an overview of what that project is going to look like over the next year. That's definitely on our radar for this fall. So I think, Teresa, were you going to suggest trying to bring some of them in for that conversation next week, or do you think as a follow-up using next week's conversation for you, so you know what connections are probably most important?
Right. Yes, I think that using next week's session, and you can
Okay.
tell me, your priorities. I think that we need to give them enough time to take a deeper dive with you and to also answer all of your questions.
Yep.
So I would hate to, housing is such a big thing. Specifically Seacoast, you'll definitely be interested in the floodplain. Mike's work on census, like I said, some of those topics are going to require, and we want to give them enough time. So, yeah, I'm going
Okay.
to use the next meeting to just kind of prioritize, and then I will feed back to you, James, and the group when we can schedule them in, and that way everybody can kind of prepare and
Sounds
get
great.
their mindset around that. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I guess the one thing that we didn't link to in the agenda for this week, but I think we should at least acknowledge as part of that conversation is Aries as well. The statewide plan. Jen, I see you looking at me kind of confused. And this information does flow two ways. And while I do think that we have a responsibility to our commissioners and our regional entities who are adopting these local plans, seeing how they tie into Aries and what the commonalities and opportunities to link into is going to be part of that conversation as well. So Teresa, if you'd be able to also at least have Aries in mind for next week's conversation as well, then I think that the way I could see that going is some of that brief information at the beginning, the presentations by the RPCs and the EDDs for this is where our things fit. This is how they were developed. This is who they were developed by. And then then I think we probably would want to brainstorm, what are some of the things that are immediately coming out at us? What are things that we want to focus on in the second half of next week's conversation, and maybe pick our top 3 or 4 issues that we'd like to take a deeper dive into. And then we maybe spend half an hour doing that dive one at a time. What is this issue? How would we like to frame our understanding as a group to our conversation before about workforce issues? How do we collectively want to understand workforce development versus workforce attraction, education, et cetera, and sort of get a shared understanding of this is how we collectively are going to talk about and pursue these 3 or 4 options. And then with whatever final time we have at the end, we might be able to begin the conversation. What can we actually do then to pursue these? Does that sound good to everybody? I'll put an agenda together with some more detailed times. And Tim, Sarah, both Teresa's, we may be touching base in the next week, specifically for that beginning of the meeting part, so that we can coordinate on presentations and how long that's going to take. Okay. Warren?
This is all excellent. One thing that's, and there was a mention of this, one thing that's often overlooked, workforce training is really important for the for the jobs that we hope to attract to the area. But as that upward mobility happens, it's just going to exacerbate the problem around other types of work. Is that I'm never going to say lacking skill, that it may be different skill types of work is, because you know, the problem is that right now nationally, and this goes to New Hampshire too, 4 million women left the job force. It's going to create a tremendous hole in our workforce here through all areas of the economy. So I think, yeah, and this is mentioned, I just want to reiterate this. I think not only is workforce development and workforce training important, but training the employers and training the small businesses are really important, because again, I sound like a broken record. Post-COVID is different, is a different economy than we've ever seen. This lack of a workforce is not going away. These supply chain problems, and this is, I'm not getting into a different issue, and I'm off the rails a little bit maybe, but supply chain problems is not only in goods, it's also in services. So we've got a service supply as well. Getting back to labor, I think that employers need assistance in how to best manage their workforce. And why are they closing 2 and 3 days a week? You know, because they can't find people. Well, you know, what are some best practices that they put into place or maybe need help?
It's a great point. Yeah, that's the $1 million question is, you know, pipeline of the labor. And I think, just a note, Emmett said he had to jump off, but I think conversations like the restaurant owners meetings that he is running, a heads up for those of you who put in the chat, the next one is scheduled for November 9th at 9 a.m. Ember and Dover. We'll be sure to get that in the notes. But if you have restaurants who are interested in to attend that, send that around. Yeah, different paradigms about how do you actually need to, you know, structure your benefits or your scheduling or things like that to be able to accommodate people or the lack of people. You know, one of our planners at SRPC is engaged to a nurse. And so he was talking on our way up to Kneecap about all of the opportunities that nurses have to take travel assignments, and they're getting paid a lot of money to travel down, you know, to another regional hospital, stay in a hotel and fill in. And they're getting paid more than the local staff, who then are leaving the local hospital to take a travel assignment right back in the other direction. Yeah, it seems like there are probably more efficient ways to work out some of these things that may involve actually taking a good hard look at benefits and retaining your own people. All right. Other comments, questions, thoughts about next week? As I said, we're always interested in building that list for potential future speakers and things that you want to get out of this group. Something else that we should also keep in mind is group format. Yeah, it seems like we've shuffled a little bit in terms of how long some of these meetings have gone the last couple of weeks. So just checking in, is once a week still working for everybody? Would this potentially be more beneficial if we did 2 a month? Undecided, want to keep chatting?
James, from my standpoint, I think if we continue to have a well-organized meeting with an agenda beforehand, I think we can really use a weekly meeting.
Okay.
Keep it going. The other thing I wanted to mention was one of the topics that is becoming of increasing interest in Dover, and I'm sure the region, this disparity in age groups in our towns. We have, Dover has probably the youngest median age population in the state, but we also have an aging population. And we've done a fair amount of work, and I know SRPC has also got a project going on age-friendly projects. And I think this is probably an area for future discussion and interest from a number of Seacoast entities. We've done a fair amount of basic work and developed a matrix to demonstrate after well over 100 interviews from all types of people in town, what the interests are, what the problems are, and how to service all age groups in our community going forward. This might be another consideration for topics in the future.
Great, good thoughts. All right, any other general issues for the group or things you want to talk about? All right, seeing none, we will get to work on an agenda for next week and give you guys more lead time this time, so you actually have time to prepare for that discussion. But thank you all for a great call this morning, and I'll see you next week.